contrary to popular belief, you've got to stop romanticizing your life. That might mean that you lack the emotional maturity to take life for what it really is. Life.
Welcome to the Lifi podcast. I'm Armandas Aksomaitis, and personally, I decided to make this podcast because sometimes I feel like I have so many thoughts to share with people that are not really adequate to share in a normal conversation unless you want to look crazy. So I just decided, why not give my thoughts a platform? So here we are on the Lifi podcast. Here I'll just be filling your brains with food for thought about technology, media, and life. Just anything I find interesting that I think you might find interesting. And I have a bachelor's degree in user experience design, which is basically a lot of research and then creating interfaces for something. So think of this as a pseudoscience podcast where I research some stuff and then write a script and make you think, oh my god, he's so smart. I hope I don't embarrass myself with this podcast, but let's just wait and see.
Episode 1. Digital Romanticism.
Romanticism emerged as an ideology in Europe in the mid-18th century in the minds of poets, artists, and philosophers, and it has now conquered the whole world. It heavily emphasizes love, emotional behavior rather than rational behavior, hopefulness, action, and excitement.
That's a lot of stuff.
A peak example of true romanticism is a love story, if you can even call it that is hailed by the masses, called Romeo and Juliet, where both characters love each other so much that they kill themselves because they can't be together.
And that's going a little too far from rational behavior.
With the help of this movement, a very flawed human behavior came into the public's eye, which is romanticizing stuff in society, by which I mean dealing with or describing something in an idealized or unrealistic fashion, making it seem better or more appealing than it actually is. This phenomenon has existed for a long time, but now it's also being influenced by the media and technology of today to take new and disturbing forms. So here's a few examples of how romanticism can manifest in the people of today. Imagine a person like this, a 15-year-old girl who's generally pretty well off in life, but she recently went through a breakup, and her social media is filled with sad song lyrics, black and white photos, pictures of anime characters crying, and photos glamorizing eating disorders.
He's okay. She's broken. He lied. She believed.
And imagine this person, a conservative 65-year-old man from Eastern Europe. He misses the simplicity of life from when he was younger in the days of the Soviet Union, because back then the world didn't seem as big and scary. Nowadays, he constantly watches pro-Russian propaganda and tells you that living occupied by the Russians was way better than in a free country. And he hates the government, period. And that's why he always expresses his opinion on various news articles on Facebook, saying,
fuck the government. Oh.
In these stories, both people are vocalizing their romanticized opinions online, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing because free speech and everything, you know? But it does contribute sometimes to fake news, conspiracy theories, and much more. Actually, the story of the 15-year-old girl type behavior on social media was a meme around a year ago. It was criticizing the community of angsty teenagers on Tumblr, Instagram, and Twitter who are actively turning mental illness into an aesthetic rather than treating it like a serious mental disorder. One can argue that even though distasteful, all of this social media presence is bringing more awareness to serious mental conditions. But one can also argue that this type of behavior is like listening to a sad song on repeat when you're sad. It only perpetuates the cycle of people hurting and not seeking out help. The 65-year-old man in this case is romanticizing the simpler times when everything used to make sense. when there were no gays, the government wasn't trying to brainwash people, and bullshit like that. At least that's what him and his tribe of people believe. And the thing about his age group of people is that they survived through the downfall of the Soviet Union and had to transition from a communist society to a capitalist one, which wasn't necessarily easy. In a lot of cases, going through a sort of wild, unregulated state of capitalism in the earlier years of their nation's independence. Since this way of life was new, it was also scary, and going through the 2008 financial crisis left them with a huge distrust of the government. If you're having trouble relating to this person, it's because this person is a caricature of a typical boomer in Eastern Europe. Americans have hillbillies, and we have these types of people, which can often be a pretty vocal minority.
So, how does popular media in our culture contribute to Romanticism?
Many of us have grown up watching Disney movies, and the Disney princess movies are a particularly important part of that franchise. There's nothing more nostalgic than rewatching these films, and it's common for us to idealize Disney princesses' relationships as the perfect fairy tale relationships. But on further inspection, you realize that the iconic Disney princess movies can portray some toxic, unhealthy, and downright abusive ideals to a majority of young girls about what a romantic relationship should look like. Beauty and the Beast is basically romanticizing Stockholm Syndrome. Prince from Snow White kisses her while presumed to be dead, and as dead people cannot give consent, that also seems pretty weird. Cinderella is telling little girls that a rich man is going to come in one day and save them from all of the hard labor. The worst thing that they all do is that they all end in happy endings, giving young girls the idea that everything will always be sunshine and roses, when a relationship and marriage could have many ups and downs. So I've also invited my smart philosopher friend Jurre to discuss more about Romanticism and why it happens, where it happens, and so on. So let's just jump into it. So I'd like to just start off by introducing you. So you're in your third year of your philosophy studies, am I right?
Yeah, I am.
And how did you decide to study philosophy?
I don't know, man. That's difficult. I guess it called to me. It's like the best way to describe it. I was like 17, and I had always wanted to be a lawyer, but I got really frustrated with all these basic existential questions. What does it mean, and why are we here, and why would it do anything? And I was like, I could be depressed by not knowing all of this, or I could try to figure it out, Then I felt like I needed to study philosophy. Oh yeah, I definitely got answers, but the answers just made everything more complex, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So like in regard to what does it all mean? Why are we here? Like there's no answer to that question, Like there's a lot of different ways to think about it, and a lot of different ways we could try to solve the anxiety that question results in. But that's more about trying to find a way to live with all of these questions. Then there's a truth out there that this question corresponds to, and we just have to find it.
Okay, deep. What are your expert opinions on the Romanticism literary movement? Do you like it? Do you think it's stupid? Do you have any opinions?
No. I think that's part of philosophy. Is you get a lot more what's the word, like reserved with saying I dislike this or I like this, because it's I don't know, it's more complex than that, and the things that I like because of the way that I grew up, and Romanticism has never been a big part of my young life. I was always into more like fantasy stuff and the whole romance in literature. Yeah, I know it's never really appealed to me, but I don't think that's necessarily something. There's something wrong with Romanticism. It's just, I don't know, I kind of evolved in a different direction,
Okay. So Romanticism is a thing of usually handling things unrealistically or portraying them better as they are. So do you have like any like instances where you've noticed that in real life, and what about those instances?
Like in my personal life?
Yeah, maybe that would be a great start.
Well, I think on a very basic level, I really romanticized getting my own place. You know, when I first moved out of my parents' house, because then you're thinking about all the things that you can do. You're not fully aware of what that concept, living by yourself, all what that entails. You're just concerned with all the good parts. You know, I get to decide what I eat and set my own bedtime and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that happened to me as well. No, like I remember thinking, you know, when you apply to universities, at least for me, at least for international students, you have to write a motivational letter. And the motivational letter, like I read it recently and it was so like reaching for the stars. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to live my social life and be like a social life. And I'm thinking like nothing is like that, you know? I had to work for the first 6 months, like hard time, you know, to just be where I am now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But do you think there's any problem there with the way we romanticize stuff like that?
I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, because like while I was writing the script for this, I was thinking, you know what? I think it's a very human thing, you know, like everyone does it. I don't know where it originates from. Why do we do it? Maybe it's because of youngness, or maybe it's because we were coddled with the media, our life, and then we finally step into the real world and we see it for what it is. But what do you think, for example?
About why
do we
romanticizing stuff originates?
Yeah.
Ooh. I don't know, man.
So, for example, have you noticed that a lot of the Disney movies that we grew up with have been romanticizing love specifically, of course? And a big like audience of those movies are little girls. So like they see the Little Mermaid, like see a guy that she doesn't even know, she's never spoken to, and then she decides to give up all of her heritage, all of her culture, her legs, her voice, just to be with the guy who it's not even sure if he likes her yet, you know? So that kind of seems weird when you put it in like realistic standards, you know, because I don't know, I'd be creeped out if someone did that for me, you know, like.
Well, I guess there's definitely something there, something interesting. As I definitely do believe that as kids we learn by example, you know, we learn from what we see, not just what our parents tell us, but also from the media we consume. And this might you know, give us a bit of a skewed picture of what a healthy relationship looks like. But yeah, I don't know. It's really a difficult thing, really, because I'm pretty sure before we had the Little Mermaid, people romanticized their lives, you know?
Yeah. But what I'm really curious is about the kids in the olden ages, like the old ages, because back then lifespans weren't as huge, you know, like you go to 30 and kaput, you know? So I wonder, did the children, like when they were 12 in those ages, did they romanticize stuff as much as we do, or is it a byproduct of maybe, let's just say, capitalism selling us this idea of whatever, or, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess they must have romanticized stuff too, but in a wildly different context, you know? You know, they might have let's say you're a kid in the Victorian age and you live in and you work in a coal mine for 14 hours a day, and then you're like, oh, at the end of the week we're gonna get to the Sunday meal, you know, the Sunday meal is always epic, and then the whole week they're working really hard and they're kept up, their spirits are kept up by this idea that on Sunday we're gonna have a really good meal, and then every Sunday the meal is kind of shit, you know.
But they took it to a really interesting place.
Yeah, but this idea can be the sustenance, you know.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we need to survive, because like I was listening to this other podcast about like what's wrong with social media, and it had like touched some topics about romanticism. So, for example, there it said that a lot of what we see on social media isn't real, you know, because everyone's putting up their best face, their best moments, and trying to maintain a certain image. And that in itself is romanticizing yourself for the world. And it makes people feel less happy at some points because they compare themselves to these like influencers and think like, oh, they have this, they have this, they have this. They must be living such a perfect life, and I'm not, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think romanticizing is like an umbrella term, you know?
Yeah.
Because the romanticizing that's happening when you're like looking at people on Instagram is very different than the romanticizing of the Sunday meal for the Victorian mine worker kid, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think the romanticizing yourself on social media in the context of capitalism, it can be taken even further, because we're not simply romanticizing ourselves; we are commodifying ourselves. So we are turning ourselves into something that is to be advertised, you know, a product to be sold. You're not selling yourself, but you're selling this image of yourself, you know.
So maybe in a way, every advertisement is like romanticizing the product, you know?
Oh, it definitely is. Like every advertisement is trying to conflate the product with some additional value. For example, when there's a perfume ad, there's always like this, you know, backdrop of luxury and wealth and these really gorgeous people, which creates the sentiment in your mind, like if I use this product, then my life will get a little more like this, you know, which on a rational level, you know, that's not true, but that sentiment is what they're trying to cultivate in you with all of this.
Yeah. But this is like such a big thing in itself, but I also feel like we're just only like scratching the surface of like, this is an instance where romanticism happened. This is an instance where romanticism happened. And I'm thinking like, why does it happen? You know, like, what does it do to us?
Well, I feel like since it's an umbrella term, the why does it happen has a lot of different answers in different contexts. So in the context of social media, you know, there could be a variety of factors. There could be this pressure that since the people around you are doing it, that you should be doing this too. This should be something you care about. You know, because there's no normative thing in the world to care about. You know, there's nothing like you wake up in the morning and I definitely have to care about this. You know. So you care if you don't have any strong opinions on this, you're not very ideologically inclined, then you're bound to like what your peers, the people that you approve of, do. You're more inclined to join in on whatever they're doing, you know. I don't know. I think it is very hard for media to give a realistic depiction of love, because love is such a multifaceted thing, you know. It is and means a lot of different things to different people. So when we're gonna make a story about this, then we have to give some kind of conception of love that our story is gonna use, and that's very much dependent on whether love in the story is a goal in itself. So we're doing this all because we want love in the abstract version, you know. A prince goes to save a princess. He's never met from a dragon for the concept of love, but not because he has any actual feelings for this person. He doesn't know them, you know?
Yeah. So instead of just a movie, sometimes maybe it's better to just have a season about love, you know? Yeah.
Or love could not be if I think the best way to go about this is if love is not the goal in itself. You know, the goal in itself is to be happy and to cultivate a good life for yourself. I think that's what we want to, the message we want to convey to young kids. And if along the way you meet someone who lines up with what you want and who factors into who you are in a meaningful way, in a way that you make each other better, you know, and that you enjoy all of this and that it feels good. I think that's the kind of way we're supposed to portray love in stories, not as like there's this predicament and then they fix it and then there's love, roll credits.
Maybe I think we touched a really interesting discussion here. So, for example, Romanticism, in my opinion at least, did set a lot of like unhealthy expectations about what love is or what it should look like or what the woman should be like, what the man should be like, and such as. So did you ever catch yourself like in any relationship just like thinking, okay, this is not what I expected, or like this actually needs more work or something like this?
Well, there are these things where you're like, we're very woke, you know. So from a very young age, I've always been like, you know, guys and girls, they are the same in a relationship. But when you're on a first date with someone that you don't know, and you don't know how they feel about all of that, you don't want to insult them, you're like, am I gonna pay for dinner? Because I don't mind paying for dinner, but I don't want to pay for dinner because it's expected because I'm the man, you know?
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff where this public conception of what a date is or what a relationship is not really what I think a relationship should be, but it's not something you discuss before, you know, paying on the first date. It's something you talk about later, you know, what love is to you.
Yeah.
So there's this Dutch comedian, and he has this whole bit about how love is just chemicals in your brain, you know, neuron firing. And this is triggered when you like first meet someone or fall in love with them, and then about a year and a half they run out. And then he's like, that's all love is, you know, it's just a trick by your brain. And I think that's very simplistic analysis of this, because it is true that there are some hormones in your brain that work in the way that he describes, but it's not that we can say that's all that love is. Love is so much more. So let's say you have these hormones that make you more dispositioned to spend time with this person, and let's say you have 1.5 years of these hormones before they run out. Yeah. Well, then you have 1.5 years where nature is guiding you to make a meaningful connection with someone beyond the point where you need these hormones to know that you love them and that you want to care for them, you know?
Smart people, yeah.
I think we should do a charitable reading of people's romanticizing things, you know? Because I think especially teen girls have a high inclination to romanticize things, like all the K-pop stans now are a very good example, you know. And I don't know, I think when I look at this phenomenon of people cringing at the K-pop stans, I'm like, are 15-year-old girls always into cringy things, or is the world inclined to think the things 15-year-old girls like are cringy? I'm personally inclined to think it's the latter, you know, because teen girls can be very, very loud and expressive about the things they're passionate about, and in a society of people that have come to let this whole romanticism go, you know, that's not what relationships like. You know, the world is more complex, and you have to pay bills, and they just don't understand that yet. And in a way, yeah, they don't understand that yet, but what they're doing right now is completely harmless, and I'm sure they will figure out, you know, what they want beyond, oh, I want to date whoever BTS guy, you know?
Yeah, but actually, I think that especially in Lithuania, where I'm from, romanticism from teenage girls really did help in some cases. So for example, they'd be like screaming gay rights, you know, because they'd be romanticizing some kind of gay relationship they read in a manga or like saw on TV, and they're just like gay rights, you know. So I really think that actually helped society for the better. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's bad, but yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for coming here, Jurre. I think we had like an interesting discussion. And where can people find you if they want to find you? Or do you want people to find you?
I don't know, man. I don't feel like I have anything else to say.
Yeah.
You know, what will people go do when they find me?
I don't know. I just said like one of the stereotypical podcast lines. You know, like where can people find you?
I think that's fine.
Okay then. Well, thanks for being here and goodbye.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So congratulations if you've made it this far, and I'd like to thank you and just say that, yeah, I don't really think romanticism is a bad thing, contrary to what I said in the beginning of the episode. I just wanted to catch your attention, you know, clickbaiting, you know, just podcast versions. I do think, though, that we should try to be more aware when we're romanticizing something in life, or when our friends are doing that, or when we see that on social media, just so we'd be aware that this isn't actually the real deal. You know, this person's delusional, or this company is just trying to sell you a product, or they're just trying to tell a nice story in a short amount of time. In the end, it just boils down to humans seeking out the need for happiness and better times in whatever way they see fit. That's pretty much it for it. On a different note, I'll only be releasing an episode a month for this podcast because that's the amount of time I'm willing to give to this personal project right now, because I'm just busy with life and doing other personal projects. Currently, I'm learning Dutch and also working at a company for 3 days a week, so that's kind of intensive. If you want to support the podcast, just interact with it. I mean, just leave a comment, leave a review wherever you're listening to, so that interaction would drive more engagement, so that the algorithm would show me more to others, you know? Or if you don't want to do that, or if you've already done that, maybe you can just donate me €1 on Patreon and just help the podcast run, you know? Maybe it'll help pay my rent, you know? So thanks for that, and see you later, guys.